I remember the way the lights reflected off the wine glasses before anything else. It was the kind of lighting that made everyone look a little more successful than they actually were. Cool-toned, expensive, staged. The 23rd floor of a downtown Austin high-rise, where Lindsay's company held their annual gala. She said I didn't have to come, but her eyes said otherwise. And lately, her eyes had been saying a lot more than her mouth ever did. I wasn't sure why I felt nervous as we took the elevator up. Maybe because I hadn't been part of her world for a long time. I used to know the names of her coworkers, her projects, the inside jokes she brought home after late meetings. Somewhere along the way, that all faded out. Now, she just called it work, and I stopped asking questions she didn't want to answer. We arrived fashionably on time, whatever that meant. I'd worn the charcoal blazer she liked, even though she didn't compliment it. She wore a dark green dress that hit her just above the knees, heels that made her my height, and that same perfume she only wore for things that mattered. Not birthdays, not anniversaries, but things like this. Lindsay walked into the room like she owned it. She always had that presence. Confident, self-contained, the kind of energy that made people turn before they even knew why. It was one of the first things I loved about her. That magnetism. The way she carried herself like she knew the ending of the story while everyone else was still flipping pages. She greeted people with hugs and laughs, some genuine, some forced. I followed behind like the obligatory spouse, nodding politely, smiling like I'd been briefed. But the truth was, I didn't recognize anyone. Not one person. There were no introductions. No, this is my husband moments. And I realized I wasn't a guest, I was a prop. At some point, she drifted away. Said she needed to speak to a manager from the Chicago office. I nodded, pretending I hadn't heard that name before, even though I had. Just last month, she'd mentioned that Chicago was a mess, but then refused to explain. I stood at the bar and ordered a whiskey neat, the kind that burns a little going down, just to remind you you're still awake. Then I saw her. Across the room, not far from the makeshift dance floor, Lindsay stood close to a man in a cobalt blue suit. He was taller than me, broader in the shoulders. Sharp haircut, the kind you get touched up twice a week. They weren't just talking, they were in something. Her body tilted toward him, her hand lightly resting on his wrist, just below his watch. That touch wasn't accidental. That was muscle memory. And the look she gave him, it wasn't polite. It wasn't friendly. It was int asterisk mate. Familiar. She smiled in a way I hadn't seen in months. Not reserved or rehearsed, but soft. Real. I froze. Glass in hand, halfway to my mouth. Couldn't drink. Couldn't blink. My heart started thudding, not fast, just heavy. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just confused. I scanned their interaction like a detective and a husband at the same time, trying to rationalize something that felt impossible but suddenly made perfect sense. He leaned in, said something low near her ear. She laughed. Quietly, but with her full face. Then she brushed a stray hair behind her ear in that way she always did when she was nervous or flattered. I hadn't seen that in forever. And then, she looked past his shoulder, right at me. There was a pause, small but noticeable. Her posture straightened slightly. Her hand dropped. The smile didn't vanish, but it changed. She broke eye contact with him and walked toward me, heels clicking against the floor with a practiced rhythm. "Hey, babe," she said, slipping next to me like nothing had happened. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, her hand brushing mine in a mechanical gesture of affection. Ugh, that guy. Always way too handsy. He's one of those guys who doesn't get boundaries. You'd think HR would have stepped in by now. She rolled her eyes and laughed lightly, like she was letting me in on a joke, but her tone didn't match her face. Too smooth, too calculated. It was a performance. Every syllable polished to perfection. That's when I realized I wasn't hearing her. I was watching her act. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Because what could I say? I saw you touch his wrist like it was something sacred? That would sound insane. Instead, I asked, "What's his name?" Her lips twitched, like I'd stepped off script. "Oh, Nick," she said quickly. "He's from the legal department. Don't worry about him. He's not important." Not important. It echoed in my head like a wrong answer on a quiz you already knew the answer to. For the rest of the night, she clung to my side like nothing had happened. She introduced me to exactly 2 people, both of whom were women, and made sure to keep her hands on me just long enough for it to feel like a statement. But every time I caught her glancing across the room, it was toward him. Nick. At one point, I excused myself to the restroom. Not because I needed to go, but because I needed to breathe. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at myself like I was trying to find the flaw she had apparently found first. I looked tired, older than I felt. Not ugly, but not exciting either. Dependable. That was the word she used a lot. You're dependable. As if that were a compliment. As if that didn't sound like stationary. I stayed in the stall for a few extra minutes. I checked my phone. Nothing. I half expected a text from her. Something sweet. A check-in. But there was nothing. Just a reminder from my calendar to renew the car insurance. Because that's who I was in this marriage now. The guy who handled logistics while she danced around with secrets. When I came back out, they were farther apart. Lindsay was at a table with some coworkers, laughing a little too loudly. Nick was chatting with someone else, but his eyes still drifted back to her more often than coincidence allowed. When it was finally time to go, she grabbed my hand and leaned against my arm, like we were still that couple. She said she was exhausted, said she couldn't wait to get home and crash. But her hand didn't squeeze mine the way it used to. It just rested there, an obligation. We rode the elevator down in silence. The city lights glittered through the glass panels, but I wasn't looking at them. I was thinking about how expertly she'd redirected the moment, how quickly she'd turned suspicion into a narrative, and how the worst part wasn't the wrist touch or the eye contact. It was how easily she lied, like she'd been practicing. When we got to the car, I opened the door for her like I always did. Habit, I guess. She smiled and kissed my cheek again, this time even lighter than before. And that's when it hit me, not all betrayals are loud. Some are whispered in plain sight, under chandeliers and catered dinners, with a smile so convincing you almost believe it, until you remember what it used to feel like when it was real. The night of the gala didn't leave my head. Not the next morning, not by the end of the week. It followed me around like static in the background of every thought. I kept replaying that moment across the room. Her smile. His hand. The way she walked toward me like she already had the answer rehearsed. But what got me the most was how quickly she packaged it. How smoothly she labeled it as workplace harassment. As if what I saw with my own eyes didn't matter. As if my perception had to be rewritten to fit her version of events. I didn't bring it up again. What would be the point? I already knew what she'd say, that I was reading into things, that I was tired, that I misinterpreted a harmless moment. So instead, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. It started on the ride home. She talked the whole way back. Stories from the office, what the CEO wore, how bad the shrimp was, but her tone was mechanical. It felt like she was narrating a highlight reel she'd memorized in advance. When I asked specific questions, like what department Nick worked in, she stumbled, said legal, but then added he might have moved over to procurement, or something like that. I didn't push. I just listened. Over the next few days, puzzle pieces I didn't know I'd been collecting started fitting themselves together. Like that new perfume. I'd first noticed it about 2 months earlier. Floral but sharp. Nothing like the warm, musky stuff she used to wear. When I asked about it back then, she said she got a sample from a coworker. Something trendy, too strong for date nights. But suddenly it was her signature. She wore it every day she left for work. Never at home. Or the late-night budget meetings that always ran long. One happened 2 weeks before the gala. I remember because we had dinner plans with her sister, and she bailed last minute, texting that she was buried in numbers. When she came home that night, her makeup was gone, but her lips looked freshly tinted. I told myself it was just the lighting. But now I remembered. Then there were the phone habits. At some point, her phone became an extension of her body. She carried it into the bathroom, kept it under her pillow, even used it as a fake sleep aid. Blue light dimmed low, screen tilted just enough that I couldn't see. A few times, I woke up in the middle of the night to find her scrolling, her face blank, her thumb barely moving. She said it was insomnia. I didn't press. But now I couldn't unsee it. Her energy changed, too. Not just toward me but around the house. She'd get moody before trips, snapping over small things like towels left on the bed or the way I loaded the dishwasher. But then she'd return from work travel oddly refreshed, rested, glowing even. She'd hug me longer, bring home little snacks from the airport. One time, she even left a note in my lunchbox, something she hadn't done in years. At the time, I thought maybe we were turning a corner. Now I realize it was guilt dressed up as gratitude. And I remembered this one night, weeks before the gala, when she came home late and mentioned crashing at Emily's after drinks. I didn't think twice. Emily was her college friend. But when I asked which bar they went to, she blanked. Said it was a divey place near Emily's apartment. Only Emily had moved 6 months earlier, to the opposite side of town. I even checked the call log that night, not on her phone but ours. We share an account. No calls to Emily. None from her either. It felt like I was standing in a gallery, staring at a mosaic I'd never understood until I took a step back. Up close, the pieces were harmless, individual moments you could excuse. But when you saw the whole thing, the image came into focus. She was pulling away. And not because of stress. Not because of work. Because there was someone else. Or at least something. Still, I hadn't seen anything concrete. Nothing I could hold up and say, here, look, this is betrayal. What I had was circumstantial, a collection of patterns and feelings that made me sound paranoid. But I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. So I started documenting. Quietly. I took *TS of vague texts. Not the messages themselves, she never left anything obvious, but the notifications. One in particular stood out. It was just a name, N. That's all. N. You around? No last name. No emoji. No context. But the timestamp matched the night she said she was staying at a hotel in Dallas for a finance summit. When I asked later if anyone else from her team went, she said no. Solo trip. Too boring for company, she joked. But when I asked where she stayed, she hesitated, just long enough that I noticed. A few days later, I looked up the hotel she claimed to be at. I checked her credit card history. Not snooping, just logged into our shared account like I'd done 100 times before. No charge from that hotel. But there was a charge from another one a few blocks over. A nicer one. A suite level kind of place. That was the first time I felt my stomach drop. Still, I said nothing. I wanted to believe I was wrong. That all of this added up to nothing. That I was a tired husband overthinking signs that didn't mean what I thought they meant. But deep down, I knew better. I started sleeping with my back turned. Not out of spite. Just distance. Emotional distance that had already been there for months, but now had a reason behind it. She noticed, of course. Started asking if I was okay. Called me quiet more often. One night, she even reached for my hand under the covers. A gesture so unexpected it made my chest hurt. I wanted to hold it. Wanted to believe it. But it felt like damage control. She was careful not to bring up the gala again. Not once. Not even when I left her standing alone in the kitchen the morning after, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She didn't ask what I thought of her coworkers. Didn't mention Nick. It was like that night was scrubbed from her memory. And in a way, I think it was filed away, redacted, rewritten. She assumed she got away with it. But I wasn't asleep anymore. I noticed when she stopped playing music in the shower. When she started closing the bathroom door all the way. When she left for work earlier but came home later. When calls with vendors became her new excuse to step outside and pace the patio, whispering with her back turned. And every night I added another note to the file I was building. Not a literal file, not yet, but one in my head. A mental ledger of every red flag she tried to paint white. There was one final thing that sealed it for me. Late one night, maybe 2:30 a.m. I got up to use the bathroom. I walked past the hallway and noticed her office door cracked open. Peeked in. She was awake, sitting at her desk, in the dark, her laptop open. Her face was lit only by the screen, and her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She was staring at an email draft. I couldn't see what it said, but I watched her sit there for at least a minute, frozen, breathing slow, staring like she didn't know whether to send it or delete it. Then she sighed, closed the lid, and turned around. I moved back into the shadows before she saw me, slipped into bed, pretended to be asleep. She crawled in beside me a few minutes later, didn't touch me, didn't say a word, but I knew in that moment, she wasn't mine anymore, at least not in the way that mattered. Came in like a whisper, no knock, no ringtone, just a silent ping in my inbox on a random Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my second coffee and trying to stay focused on work when I saw the subject line. She forgot about the cameras. No greeting, no name, just that line, sitting there like a loaded G*N in plain sight. Attached was a video file. MP4. No description, no warning. I stared at it for a long time, my mouse hovering over the play button, my stomach doing flips. A dozen rational thoughts ran through my head. Could be spam, could be malware, could be a prank. But something in me knew this is it. I clicked play. It opened with a timestamp, 7:14 p.m., a hotel room. Not grainy, not pixelated, clear enough to make out every detail. Modern furnishings, neutral colors, abstract art above the couch. And then, like clockwork, the door opened. She walked in. Lindsay, wearing the same olive green blouse she'd worn the day she told me she'd be stuck late in a budgeting meeting. I remembered because we had planned to meet for dinner, and she'd canceled with that exact line. Swamped. We'll reschedule. Promise. I watched her step into the room, toss her purse on the chair like she'd done it 100 times. She moved with the ease of someone who wasn't hiding, at least not from the room. A few moments later, he entered. The man from the gala. Nick. No name tag this time. No company lanyard or after-hours excuse. Just him in a navy suit, casual, smiling. She smiled too. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. The video had no sound. Didn't need it. Their mouths moved, but the conversation didn't matter. You could read the comfort in their body language, the familiarity, the gravity between them. They weren't nervous. They weren't testing the waters. They were already in. She reached up and touched his chest. He laughed, leaned in, said something close to her ear. She responded with a slow nod, then walked over to the minibar, opened it, handed him a drink. They toasted, sat on the couch. Not 2 minutes later, she leaned into him, her hand on his knee, his arm around her waist. Then they kissed. Not a hesitant kiss, not new. This was practiced, confident. The kind of kiss you give someone when the hard part, the secrecy, the decision is already behind you. And then they laid back, still clothed but locked in a moment that didn't need interpretation. I stopped the video. I couldn't watch anymore. My hands were trembling. I didn't realize until the cursor danced across the screen in random directions. I clenched them into fists and tried to breathe. But the world didn't slow down. This wasn't a theory anymore. This wasn't just perfume, hotel receipts, or glances across the room. This was the truth. Undeniable, unmistakable, unforgivable. The email had no sender name, just a string of random characters and a server I didn't recognize. Whoever sent it had done so anonymously. No explanation, no request, no threat, just the raw evidence, dropped in my lap like a final puzzle piece. I didn't need to ask how they got it. I didn't even care. Maybe the hotel had cameras. Maybe a whistleblower had been watching. Or maybe it was someone in her orbit who'd finally had enough. The why didn't matter. The what did. I sat there in silence, staring at the dark screen after the video closed. I could still see her face in my mind. Softly lit, smiling, brushing her hand through her hair like she always did when she was happy. She hadn't smiled like that at me in a long time. I thought about the night she canceled dinner. How I'd waited for her. Sent her a text saying, "Grab takeout. Be safe. Love you." She'd replied 3 hours later, "Sorry, just getting out. Love you too." She'd been in a hotel room with him. Not at the office. Not stuck in a conference room with budget reports. She was with him, smiling, touching, laughing. and she'd sent me that text. The sheer precision of the lie felt like another betrayal. She didn't just cheat. She covered it in a performance. And I applauded it without knowing. I didn't cry. Not yet. I don't think I was capable in that moment. The emotion hadn't caught up to the clarity. I just sat still, breathing, thinking. I didn't know what to do next. There's this moment after you learn the truth, after the guessing ends, where you feel like you're floating. Like gravity lets go just long enough for you to glimpse how far the fall will be. That was me, suspended, numb. I replayed the last few weeks in my head. Her mood shifts, her sudden attention to how she looked, the way she kept her phone face down, the shower running longer, the extra stops on the way home from work. All of it made sense now. The distance hadn't been accidental. It was strategy, emotional subtraction. She was preparing for this, for him, long before I noticed the first crack. And I was the quiet background music to her double life. The soft noise that kept things stable while she played with matches behind my back. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't forward it. I didn't save it to a folder marked evidence or divorce. Not yet. I closed my laptop, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water with shaky hands and stood by the window. Outside, it was one of those crisp, cloudless mornings. The kind that almost dares you to feel optimistic. Birds on the fence, mail truck rolling by, kids laughing somewhere down the block. The world kept turning, but something had shifted permanently. I wasn't the guy wondering anymore. I wasn't the guy giving the benefit of the doubt or making excuses. I was the guy with the tape, the video, the irrefutable truth. And the worst part? She didn't even seem sorry. She didn't know she'd been caught. She was probably sitting at her desk right then, sipping coffee, texting him under some saved contact like Nicolette or vendor number 2, still thinking she had control of the narrative, still underestimating me. Later that day, she sent me a photo from her office. Just a silly selfie, her with a confused face and a spreadsheet in the background. Help. Numbers hate me. It made me physically sick. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the woman in it with the woman in that hotel room. And I couldn't. They weren't the same. Or maybe they were. And I was just the last person to see it. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when she walked into the kitchen wearing one of my t-shirts like it meant something. She yawned, kissed my cheek out of routine, and made a smoothie with almond milk she knew I hated. The sound of the blender nearly drowned out the noise in my head. She didn't know I knew, and I wasn't about to give her the stage to lie on cue. Instead, I filed for divorce. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I gathered my documents, forwarded the email to a secure backup account, and booked a consultation with a local attorney. I explained everything, minus the part where my voice cracked twice and I had to pause for water. He didn't flinch, just nodded. Infidelity's hard, he said flatly. But it makes things cleaner in court. Clean. There was nothing clean about the way it felt. I signed the paperwork 2 days later. Didn't tell her. Didn't leave it on the table or wave it around like a victory. Just took it to the courthouse, filed it, and drove home in silence. It was a strange kind of stillness, the kind where nothing dramatic happens but everything changes. That night, she came home later than usual. Said she stopped at Target. There were no bags. She kissed me like always, made small talk, asked if I wanted to watch something. I said I was tired and went upstairs. Not a lie, just not the truth she was expecting. She didn't question it. She never did. When she left for work the next morning, I was already gone. No note, no key on the counter, no trace. I had packed the essentials. Clothes, laptop, toothbrush, charger, and booked a month-to-month rental through a friend's company. It wasn't glamorous. 1 bedroom, old paint, creaky floors. But it was mine. Mine in a way nothing had been in months. She didn't call. Not immediately. But later that afternoon, she sent a text. Hey, are you picking up dinner or should I? I didn't respond. Then another. You okay? Nothing. It took about 6 hours for the silence to set in. That's when the messages changed tone. Mark, where are you? Your stuff is gone. Did something happen? I'm freaking out. Please say something. I read every word, but I didn't type a single letter back. She called 6 times. I let them ring. Then she tried voicemail. The first was confusion. The second, concern. By the third, her voice cracked. If this is about work stuff, just talk to me. I'm not mad. I just want to fix whatever's wrong. But I didn't want to fix it, because I hadn't broken it. Later that evening, I heard the doorbell on my apartment ring. Once, then twice. I peeked through the peephole. She was standing there, clutching her phone, eyes wide, lips pressed tight like she was holding back a scream or a sob. I didn't open the door. I just stood on the other side and waited. Eventually, she left. The next day, the texts came in waves, starting with anger. You're acting insane. If you needed space, you could have said so. Then bargaining. Can we please talk? Just once? I need to understand what's happening. Then nostalgia. Remember Colorado? That tiny cabin with the broken heater? I keep thinking about that night. She sent photos of us, of a trip to Maine, a blurry selfie at a concert, a picture of our dog before she passed. Her way of saying, remember us? I remembered, but I also remembered the olive blouse, the video, the hotel suite, and I stayed quiet. Eventually, the messages slowed, like a storm losing steam. The last one came 3 days after I left. I don't know what you think happened, but whatever this is, you're not being fair. Fair. That was the word that made me laugh. Not out loud, not in joy. Just a bitter exhale from somewhere deep in my chest. As if fairness had anything to do with where we ended up. That weekend, I went to a local park with a coffee and no plans. Just sat. Watched strangers walk their dogs, kids throw frisbees, an old man argue with a pigeon. I hadn't noticed until then how tightly wounded I'd been. Living in fight or flight without realizing I was even in a battle. Being alone didn't feel lonely. Felt honest. There were no half-truths. No vague explanations. No screen turned away at midnight. No silence that hid landmines beneath it. Just me. A guy with a paper cup and an empty marriage behind him. That night, I started sleeping through the night again. No anxiety jolting me awake. No phantom light from her phone. Just quiet. I hadn't realized how loud our silence had become. The next week, her sister called. Mark, she said. Lindsay's been crying nonstop. She doesn't know what's going on. I stayed quiet. She said you just disappeared. She's scared. I stayed quiet. You can't just ghost your wife. I finally spoke. She ghosted me first. Just slower. A pause. Then, she made mistakes. But come on, everyone does. Marriage isn't about perfection. I almost said it. I almost said there's video. But I didn't owe her that. I didn't owe anyone anything. I ended the call politely. Her mother called next. Left a voicemail that sounded less like concern and more like judgment. Something about throwing away vows and trying harder. She said Lindsay was heartbroken and blindsided. Blindsided. That word stuck. She wasn't blindsided. She just didn't expect the mirror. And when she saw herself in it, she didn't recognize what she'd become. Another day passed. Then another. I started waking up without checking my phone. Started reading again. Went to the gym. Ate a real breakfast. I stopped missing her. Not because the pain faded, but because I realized I'd been grieving the version of her that didn't exist anymore. The one who used to leave notes on my windshield. Who used to laugh until she cried watching dumb sitcoms. Who used to hug me like she was afraid I'd vanish. She had vanished. Long before I walked away. It just took me until now to see it. They came in like clockwork. The calls, the texts, the thinly disguised interventions. One by one, people in Lindsay's orbit started reaching out. Some gently, others not so much. But the message was always the same. Talk to her. Fix this. Don't throw everything away. It started with her sister again. This time it wasn't crying, it was strategy. Mark, you've made your point, she said flatly. But disappearing isn't how grown-ups handle marriage problems. I didn't respond. She kept going. She's a wreck. She hasn't eaten in days. She's not sleeping. She's afraid she ruined everything. She had ruined everything. But I stayed silent. Can't you two at least sit down like adults? You owe her that. I almost laughed at the word owe, as if emotional betrayal could be itemized into debts. I thanked her for calling and ended the conversation before I said something I couldn't take back. 2 days later, her mom called again. This time, she skipped the soft edge. I don't know what Lindsay told you, but this behavior is childish. People make mistakes. What matters is what they do next. I listened, because that's all I ever did when it came to her mother. Let her talk while she steamrolled nuance. She's trying, Mark. She's calling, texting. She's showing up to work half alive. What more do you want from her? I considered answering honestly. I wanted fidelity. I wanted honesty. I wanted a version of her that didn't collapse behind my back while performing stability to my face. Instead, I said, I appreciate your concern. That seemed to bother her more than if I'd yelled. I could hear the frustration in her pause. Don't you want to fight for your marriage? I sighed. I already did. You just weren't there for that part. Click. Then came the wild card, someone I didn't expect. Her coworker. A guy named Jason I'd only met twice, both times at company mixers where Lindsay did all the talking. He messaged me on LinkedIn of all places like this was a professional dispute. Hey Mark, I know this is random, but I wanted to say something. Hope that's okay. I should have ignored it, but curiosity has teeth. He continued, I don't know the full story between you and Lindsay, and I'm not trying to pry, but she's a good person, and I've seen her struggling at work, really down. I just thought maybe a neutral voice might help. Whatever happened, don't let go of something real if there's even a shred left. Take care, man. I read it 3 times. Neutral voice. That's what he called it. But no one neutral ever picks a side. I didn't reply. The following day I got a package. No name on the return label, just her handwriting across the front. Inside was a shoebox filled with memories. Literally. A bundle of Polaroids wrapped in twine. A small bottle of the cologne she bought me on our anniversary. A folded page from a book we once read aloud together on a rainy night. A playlist burned to a USB drive titled, Before We Forgot. At the bottom was a handwritten note. I miss the us that laughed. The us that knew each other without words. I know I hurt you. I won't deny it. But I haven't stopped believing that the us we were is still possible. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. L. Should have made me feel something. Instead, I felt manipulated. Because I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't an apology. It was a campaign. She couldn't control the silence, so she tried to control the narrative. Paint herself as the broken but willing partner. The regretful heart hoping for redemption. She was building a case for sympathy, and she was doing it one subtle public gesture at a time. I didn't burn the box. I didn't return it either. I just closed it, pushed it to the back of my closet, and let it gather dust alongside everything else she'd left behind. Her friend group joined in next, digital soldiers with soft we *p***ns. One posted a quote to their Instagram story. Real love means not walking away when things get hard. Another reshared an old group photo with us in it, captioned, Miss these simpler days, broken heart. Lindsay herself posted something for the first time in weeks. A picture of our dog, Bailey, curled up on the couch from back when things were good. No caption, just a timestamp, a breadcrumb for sympathy, a whisper to her followers. Look at what I lost. I didn't react, didn't like it, didn't comment, but I saw it. The likes poured in, messages of support, heart emojis, comments like, thinking of you, and you'll get through this. Not one of them knew the truth. Not one of them had watched that video. Not one had woken up at 2 a.m. to the sound of silence broken by screen taps and subtle shifting on the mattress. None of them had lived in the aftermath of loving someone who stopped choosing you. But sure, go ahead and post a dog. By week's end, I'd stopped checking my phone for updates. The group chats I once shared with her friends had all gone quiet. Or maybe they'd kept talking, just without me. I imagined the theories flying, he must have snapped. He was always too quiet. She's devastated. She tried so hard. They needed a villain. And when you don't speak up, people make one for you. But I wasn't angry, not even at them, because they were responding to the only version of the story they had access to. The curated pain. The surface-level sorrow. No one thinks the woman crying on Instagram is the same one who lied through her teeth while holding another man's hand. And I wasn't about to give them the rest. This wasn't about revenge. It was about release. And that meant letting them believe what they needed to. Letting her bury herself in her own theater. Letting the campaign play out without ever stepping onto the stage. One night, I got dinner with an old friend. Someone who didn't know the full story but knew me well enough to see something was off. He asked how I was doing and I shrugged. Feels like I'm watching someone edit the story while I'm still living it, I said. He nodded slowly. And I'm done giving them lines. He smiled. That sounds like peace. Maybe it was. I still had hard days. Days when the silence felt like a weight instead of a relief. When I missed the smell of home. The comfort of familiarity. The idea of being someone's safe place. But I never missed her. Not the real her. Not the version who practiced lies in front of a mirror while sending hearts through a screen. The pressure from the outside didn't work. It never had a chance. Because once you see someone clearly, once the veil drops and the shadows become shape, you can't pretend you're in love with a ghost. You can only mourn what it used to be, and move forward without apology.